The chandeliers in Danish Kassem's penthouse were so bright they made Zara squint every morning when she pulled back the floor-length curtains. She had been doing it for 11 months, pulling those curtains, polishing that marble, folding those impossibly soft cashmere throws that probably cost more than her monthly wage. And in 11 months, Danish Kassem had looked through her exactly 43 times. She had counted, not out of heartbreak, but out of curiosity. She wondered what it felt like to be so rich that other human beings became part of the furniture. Zara Malik was 24. She had a literature degree from a mid-tier university, a rented room in a shared apartment in Gulshan, and a talent for making spaces feel clean and calm. She had taken the job through a domestic staffing agency after her mother's health had taken a turn and the hospital bills began arriving like unwelcome relatives. There was no shame in her work. Mrs. Farrak, the head housekeeper, had told her on the first day, "The woman who keeps a house running is the woman who truly runs it. Never forget that." Zara hadn't forgotten. She was methodical. She memorized which surfaces needed extra care, which rooms Danish avoided, which mornings he left early and which afternoons he lingered in the study with his reading glasses on, looking older than his 31 years. She didn't romanticize him. He was sharp-featured, well-dressed, cold in the way that very wealthy men often are, not from cruelty necessarily, but from a lifetime of never needing to be warm. On the night everything quietly shifted, it was past midnight. The rest of the staff had gone. Zara was finishing the dining room after a dinner party that had ended badly. She had overheard raised voices, a deal gone wrong, the kind of fury that comes when a man's reputation feels threatened. She was stacking crystal glasses when she heard footsteps, unsteady and slow, and Danish walked in still in his dinner suit, tie loosened, a glass of scotch in his hand that was clearly not his first. He didn't see her at first. Then he did, and he stopped. "What are you still doing here?" he asked. Not rudely, just genuinely confused. "Finishing up, sir," Zara said. "I'll be done in 10 minutes." He nodded, sat down heavily at the long dining table that could seat 20, and put his forehead in his hand. She moved quietly around him. She was almost done when he spoke again, not to her exactly, more to the room. "Do you ever feel like everything you built is just one decision away from disappearing?" Zara paused. She could have stayed silent. That would have been the invisible thing to do. Instead she said, "Yes. But I've learned that what you build from nothing is harder to take away than what you inherit." Danish looked up at her then. Truly looked. For the first time in 11 months. Life lesson woven in. Your value is never defined by the role you are placed in. The quality of your character speaks in rooms where your title cannot reach. Danish didn't say anything for a long moment after Zara spoke. He just looked at her the way people look at a painting they had walked past 100 times and suddenly noticed for the first time, not with drama, but with the quiet embarrassment of having missed something obvious. "Sit down," he said. Zara raised an eyebrow. "Sir, I'm staff. I don't think. I'm not asking you to work. I'm asking you to sit." She hesitated. Mrs. Farrak's voice was in her head, gentle but clear. "Know your place, but never shrink yourself." Zara pulled out a chair 2 seats away from him and sat, straight-backed, hands folded in her lap. They talked for 2 hours. Not about anything dramatic. He talked about the deal that had collapsed, a luxury development project that 3 investors had backed out of in a single evening. She listened the way she always did, fully, without performing sympathy. When he asked about her, she answered simply. Literature degree. Mother's illness. The agency. The work. "You don't seem like someone who planned to be here," he said. "Most people don't plan their hardest chapters," she replied. "They just live through them." He looked at her again with that same quiet attention. It started slowly after that night. Not with grand gestures. Danish was not a grand gesture kind of man. It was small things. He began leaving a light on in the dining room when he knew she was finishing late. Once, he left a cup of tea on the counter with a note that said simply, "Thought you might need this." Mrs. Farrak noticed and said nothing, which meant she noticed everything. Zara was not naive. She understood the distance between their worlds was not just financial. It was structural, social, deeply woven into how Danish Kassem had been raised to see people. But in those quiet late evenings when the house was empty and Danish wandered into whatever room she was in and conversation fell between them like something natural, she allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Scene. Over 3 weeks, the evenings grew longer. He showed her a project blueprint once, spread across the dining table, and asked what she thought of the design. She pointed to the public courtyard section and said it felt cold, too geometric, no life in it. He studied it, then quietly sketched something in the margin. She never knew if he used it. Then came the night his mother visited. Mrs. Kassam was a tall woman who wore her wealth like armor. She arrived unannounced on a Thursday afternoon and Zara felt the temperature of the house change immediately. She moved through the penthouse doing her work, invisible as always, until she rounded the corner of the hallway and nearly walked into Mrs. Kassam herself. The older woman looked at her slowly, top to bottom. "You're the new cleaning girl." "Yes, Danish mentioned a staff change. "You're younger than I expected." There was nothing in her words, and everything in her tone. 2 days later, Danish called all the household staff to the main sitting room. It was unusual. Zara stood near the back beside Mrs. Farrak, who had already folded her hands in the way she did when she sensed something unpleasant approaching. Danish stood near the window. He didn't look at anyone in particular when he spoke. "I'll be making some staffing adjustments. The agency will be contacted. This is purely a restructuring decision." Then his eyes landed on Zara. Just for a second. And in that second she saw it. Not cruelty, exactly, but something worse. Discomfort. The look of a man who had decided that his embarrassment was more important than her dignity. "The newer staff members will be the first transition," he said. And he looked away. Zara didn't cry. She had taught herself long ago that tears in front of people who don't deserve them are a gift they haven't earned. She collected her things from the staff room in silence. Mrs. Farrak walked her to the service elevator, pressed her hand firmly, and whispered, "Some people only realize what they dismissed when it's too late to apologize properly. You walk out of here with your head up." Zara did. She pressed the button for the ground floor, watched the doors close, and felt the weight of something ending. But also, very faintly, the first cold breath of something beginning. Life lesson woven in: the cruelest thing a person can do is make someone feel worthy and then revoke it for the sake of appearances. But that revocation says everything about them and nothing about you. The room Zara returned to that night was small, a single window, a shared bathroom down the hall, a shelf of books she had read so many times the spines had softened. Her roommate Nadia was awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed with a bowl of instant noodles, and took one look at Zara's face and said, "I'll make another bowl." Nadia was the kind of friend who didn't ask questions immediately. She waited until Zara had eaten half her noodles and stared at the wall long enough before she said, "Tell me." So Zara told her. Not everything, but enough. Nadia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay. So we burn his building down metaphorically. What's the plan?" Zara almost laughed. "I don't have one yet." "Then we'll find one." The plan found Zara 3 weeks later, in a cardboard box. Her mother, recovering slowly from her second surgery, had asked Zara to go through some storage at her aunt's house, old family things that had been sitting untouched since her grandmother's passing 2 years ago. Zara had gone expecting dusty dishes and faded photographs. Instead she found journals. 6 of them, small and leather-bound, written in her grandmother's careful handwriting. Begum Soraya Malik had been a seamstress in Lahore who had built, over 30 years, a small but remarkable clothing house that dressed the wives of politicians and the daughters of old money. Zara had known this vaguely, the way grandchildren know things, as background, as story, not as fact. But the journals were facts. They were filled with fabric receipts, design sketches, business correspondence, records of clients. And near the end of the last journal, written in a shakier hand, a passage that made Zara sit down on the dusty floor and read it 3 times. "The brand was taken from me through paperwork I did not fully understand. I was told it was debt. I believe it was theft. I have no energy left to fight. But I hope one day someone in this family reads this and understands what was built here, and what was possible." Zara sat with that for a long time. Then she took out her phone and called Nadia. "I found the plan," she said. What followed was not a movie montage. It was 2 years of the most grueling, unglamorous work Zara had ever done. She took 3 freelance jobs simultaneously: content writing, translation, and weekend event coordination, stacking every spare rupee while Nadia, who had a sharp eye for finance, helped her trace the original trademark filings on her grandmother's brand. They hired a young intellectual property lawyer named Tariq, who worked out of a one-room office and charged them in installments, and who told them after 6 months of digging, the trademark was allowed to lapse. Which means it can be reclaimed. And the original design archives, if you have them, establish creative lineage. Zara had the journals. She had the sketches. She had the lineage. She registered Zara Malik Couture on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting in Tariq's tiny office, Nadia beside her eating a mango she had brought from outside. When the confirmation came through on Tariq's laptop, Nadia raised the mango like a champagne glass. "To your grandmother," Nadia said. "To Mrs. Farrak," Zara added. "And every woman who kept someone else's house running while her own dreams waited." The first collection Zara launched was small, 12 pieces, photographed in Nadia's cousin's courtyard, shared on social media with zero budget and every ounce of Zara's literary instinct applied to the captions. She wrote about her grandmother, about fabric, about what it means to build something from the floor up. It was shared 11,000 times in 4 days. A buyer from a boutique in Dubai messaged by the end of the week. Zara didn't sleep that night, not from anxiety, but from the particular electricity of realizing that the thing you built in private is starting to breathe on its own. 2 years became 3. The boutique became 5 boutiques. A feature in a regional fashion magazine became an international profile. Nadia became coup. Tariq became their head of legal. And Zara Malik, who had once folded cashmere throws in a penthouse that didn't belong to her, was invited as a keynote speaker to the annual luxury brand summit in Karachi. She accepted. She already knew Danish Kassem would be there. She didn't go for him. She went because she had earned the seat. But she would be lying if she said she didn't choose her outfit carefully. Life lesson woven in: your lowest chapter is not your final chapter. Sometimes the thing that breaks your comfortable situation is the exact force needed to push you toward your real one. Grief, when survived, becomes fuel. And ancestry, when discovered, becomes direction. The Karachi Luxury Brand Summit was held at a seafront hotel so aggressively grand that even the elevators had chandeliers. Zara noticed this and felt nothing in particular about it. 3 years ago that kind of opulence would have made her feel small. Now it just made her think about lighting costs. She arrived without an entourage, which Nadia had strongly protested. "You are the founder and CEO of the fastest-growing fashion house in South Asia," Nadia had said that morning, watching Zara do her own eyeliner in the mirror of their shared hotel room. They still shared rooms at events, out of habit and genuine preference. "You should walk in with at least 4 people behind you." "I walked into Danish Kassem's penthouse every morning with a mop," Zara said. "I think I can manage a hotel ballroom." "That is both inspiring and deeply annoying," Nadia replied. Zara wore ivory. Her grandmother's journals had mentioned ivory as the color of quiet confidence, not the white of surrender, Begum Soraya had written, but the white of a woman who has already decided. The silhouette was structured, the fabric was a hand-woven cotton sourced from artisans in Malton, and the embroidery along the collar had been adapted from a sketch in Journal No. 3. Every piece Zara wore told a story. That was the foundation of her brand. She entered the ballroom at exactly the time she was scheduled to enter, not fashionably late, not anxiously early. On time, because she had learned that punctuality is a form of self-respect. The room shifted. It was subtle at first, a turn of a head, a nudge between 2 people, a pause in conversation. Zara Malik Couture had a face now, and that face had just walked in, and the industry knew it. She moved through the room the way she had learned to move through Danish penthouse, with full awareness of every space around her, calm, purposeful, taking up exactly the amount of room she was entitled to. She was halfway to the welcome table when she saw him. Danish Kassem stood near the far window with 2 men she didn't recognize, holding a glass of water, looking exactly as he always had, well pressed, controlled, slightly removed from the warmth of the room around him. He hadn't seen her yet. Standing 3 feet to his left, however, was Cyrus. Danish's cousin had met Zara at a trade event 6 months earlier, before either of them had connected the dots about their shared history with Danish. Cyrus was warmer than his cousin, quicker to laugh, and had immediately recognized the quality of Zara's brand and proposed a collaboration that was currently in its 2nd successful season. When his eyes found her across the ballroom now, he grinned and raised his glass. She smiled back. It was Cyrus crossing the room to greet her that caused Danish to turn. And that was the moment. Danish Kassem, who had built his entire adult life on the ability to read a room and remain unmoved by it, went visibly still. Zara watched it happen from 15 feet away, the recognition arriving in stages, like slow dawn. First the face. Then the memory behind the face. Then the full weight of what the face now meant in this room, in this industry, in this world he considered his own territory. She walked toward him because she chose to. Not because she was drawn to him, not because the old feeling pulled her. She had done enough work on herself in 3 years to know the difference between gravity and choice. She walked toward him because she was done letting that chapter feel unfinished. Danish, she said. His name in her mouth was neither warm nor cold. It was simply accurate. Zara, he said. And then, because he was still Danish Kassem, he tried to recover into composure. You look, I didn't know you would be here. I'm keynoting, she said simply. The 2 men he had been standing with looked between them with the alert curiosity of people sensing a history they haven't been introduced to. Danish dismissed them with a brief word and they drifted away. Cyrus, reading the room with his characteristic intelligence, patted Zara's shoulder once and said, I'll see you at the panel, and disappeared. She and Danish stood facing each other for the first time in 3 years. He looked the same. She knew she did not. Not because she had become someone unrecognizable, but because the version of herself she was standing in now had been built entirely after him. You built something remarkable, he said. His voice was careful. She could hear him choosing each word like a man walking across uncertain ground. I followed the brand. The Molten Textile partnership especially, that was. Danish, she said, not unkindly. You don't need to review my portfolio. I know it's good. He stopped. A muscle moved in his jaw. I owe you an apology, he said then, and she could tell it cost him something real. Danish Kassem was not a man who said those words easily. Zara looked at him for a moment. She thought about the service elevator. The doors closing. Mrs. Farrakhar's hand pressing hers. You do, she agreed. But I didn't come here tonight for it. Life lesson woven in. The most powerful position you can stand in is one you built yourself, with no debt to the person who doubted you. When you no longer need the apology to feel whole, you have truly healed. Danish looked at her the way people look when they realize an argument has already been settled without them. Then why? He started. Because I'm keynoting, Zara said, and there was the smallest lift at the corner of her mouth. I told you that already. He almost smiled. Almost. They stood in that particular silence that only exists between 2 people who once knew each other in private and are now meeting in public as entirely different versions of themselves. It was not comfortable. But it was honest, and Zara had come to value honesty above comfort a long time ago. Can I ask you something? Danish said. You can ask. When you left, were you, he paused, searching. Were you already planning all of this? Zara considered the question seriously, because he deserved a serious answer. No, she said. When I left I was just trying not to fall apart in the service elevator. The planning came later. The clarity came later. Most things that matter come later than you expect them to. He nodded slowly. She could see something working through him, not quite guilt, more like the particular reckoning of a person who thought they understood the world and discovered a significant miscalculation. I told myself it was practical, he said quietly. What I did. I told myself there were real reasons. There probably were, Zara said. And they were probably also cowardice. Most honest things are both at once. Danish looked at her with something new in his expression. Not longing exactly, she was relieved it wasn't longing, because she had no use for it. It was more like recognition. The recognition of someone finally seeing a person correctly after a long time of seeing them wrong. "You're not angry," he said. It seemed to confuse him. "I was," she said. "I worked through it. Anger is useful early. After a certain point, it just burns the person carrying it." She reached into her clutch and produced a small card, clean ivory, her name in simple type, the brand's logo a tiny embroidered motif reproduced in ink. She held it out. "Cyrus and I are expanding the artisan partnership to include a heritage restoration project, old family craft businesses that were buried or stolen. We're looking for real estate infrastructure. Sustainable, community-embedded buildings. Not glass towers," she tilted her head slightly. "If that's something your firm could approach differently than it has in the past, have your team call mine." Danish took the card. He looked at it for a moment, then at her. "This is a professional offer," he said slowly. "Yes. Nothing else." "Danish," she said gently, "that ship didn't just sail. I dismantled it for parts and built something better." This time he did smile. Small, real, a little rueful. The most human she had ever seen him look, including the midnight conversations and the cups of tea left on counters. "Your grandmother would have been proud," he said, and she understood from his tone that he had done his research, that he knew the story behind the brand, that this was not a throwaway compliment. It landed. She allowed it to land. "She was proud before me," Zara said. "I'm just finishing what she started." She excused herself then. She had a panel to prepare for, a keynote to deliver, Nadia waving at her from across the room with the expression of someone who had been watching this entire exchange and was going to require a full debriefing. The keynote Zara gave that evening was not about luxury or fashion or market trends. It was about her grandmother's journals. About a woman who built something beautiful in a time and place that didn't make it easy. About inherited genius and stolen legacies and the responsibility of those who survive hard chapters to finish what those before them began. She talked about the artisan women in Malton whose craft had been passed down through generations and nearly lost. She talked about what it means to build a brand with memory in it. The room was very quiet while she spoke. Afterward, a young woman approached her, perhaps 20, wearing clothes that didn't cost much, holding a small notebook, with a particular posture of someone who is used to being overlooked. "I want to build something," the young woman said. "But I don't know where to start and everything feels too far away." Zara looked at her for a moment. She thought about a cardboard box full of journals. A one-room office and a lawyer paid in installments. Nadia with a mango raised like a champagne glass. "Start with what you already have," Zara said. "Not what you wish you had. What you actually, currently have in your hands." The young woman wrote it down. That, Zara thought, was the only ending that actually mattered. Not Danish's expression when he saw her walk in. Not the business card passed between them or whatever professional chapter might follow. Not the old feeling she had quietly, privately, respectfully folded and put away like a garment from a season that had passed. What mattered was the notebook. The young woman writing something down. The possibility that one conversation, offered freely, might become someone else's beginning. On the drive back to the hotel, Nadia sat beside her in the car and said, "Okay. Full debrief. Everything. Starting from the elevator moment." There was no elevator moment. "Zara, I saw his face when you walked in. His face is his business." Nadia turned to look at her fully. "Are you okay?" "Actually okay." Zara looked out the window at the Karachi coastline sliding past, lit and moving and indifferent to personal history in the way that water always is. "Yes," she said. And meant it completely. "I think I've been okay for a while. I just needed tonight to prove it to myself." Nadia leaned her head on Zara's shoulder. "Your grandmother would have been annoying about how proud she was," Nadia said. "I know," Zara said. "I'm counting on it." Final life lesson. Healing is not the moment someone who hurt you finally sees your worth. Healing is the moment you realize you stopped needing them to. The most important chapter in any story is not the return. It is the quiet, unglamorous, deeply personal rebuilding that made the return possible. Build for yourself first. The rest will follow.